member of the Water Resources Planning Committee. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Water Utilities.
Good morning. My name is Andrew Fisk. I'm the Bureau Director for Land and Water Quality and the DEP.
I'm Bob Marviny. I'm the Director of the Maine Geological Survey, and I'm Chair of the Water Resources Planning Committee.
I'm Andy Ullman. I'm Assistant Director of the Maine CDC Drinking Water Program.
I'm Marcia Spencer-Famous, and I'm a Senior Planner at Water.
We have been charged by the legislature to do some work between now and the time the legislature reconvenes in January. This commission, with the Water Planning Committee and the AG's office, is supposed to undertake, and the lead group is the Water Planning Committee, and Bob as chair will be directing all of us and leading all of us, but our charge is to conduct a review relating to international trade agreements and the management of groundwater resources. And what we need to do today is to finalize a work plan that we need to review the plan, identify experts needed to help us to do that work, to talk about a timetable in terms of completion of the work and how we're going to fund this work.
Emphasize that I view this very much as a collaborative effort, fully cooperative, and I'd be happy to be considered a co-chair of this effort along with you or whoever is appropriate from the Trade Commission. We have very complementary expertise on these two groups. Following several years of study of where the state stands in terms of regulations of groundwater withdrawals, a previous study committee put together several recommendations to the legislature, some of which were adopted in 2007. One part fixed a loophole in the regulations, and now we have in place regulations that almost every large-scale extraction well gets a pretty detailed review. That was one thing that happened. But the other part was the legislature set up this stakeholder committee of users of water, interest groups, and state agency folks to look at the issues of groundwater extraction from a kind of the resource standpoint and delve into whether we are being appropriately protective of the resource and potentially conflicting uses of the resource.
That part of having been asked by a number of individual legislators as well as a couple of committees to talk with them about treaty issues, one of the goals that I have for this work, I think our office has, is that we would come up with something that is a useful explanation to people who are not maybe into the water issue but want to understand, in a common sense sort of way that's not too complicated, how the treaties can impact state law. And I'm particularly interested in what guidance we might be able to afford about, here are the treaties that would affect water, for example. Here are the standards that challenges would be brought under, and so legislators, as you're considering bills that are in areas where this issue might arise, these are the things you need to watch for: non-discrimination, etc. So that, and then the staff would have that information, so that we feel a little more informed as we're dealing with bills that tend to pop up anywhere. Although there certainly was a confluence, we might say, of water bills this year.
This is the groundwater resource. This is the regulation, and then perhaps, if there's time, this is the property law framework conversation.
The next section on current negotiations and trade requests, I don't really, this is really getting into the legal side that I'm not familiar with at all, but various aspects of these negotiations would be another part of what we report back. And anyone who knows more about this than I do, please chime in.
May I just, again, we're very fortunate to have with us today Bill Warren from the Forum on Democracy and Trade and Georgetown Law School, who is an expert in these areas.
So we'd certainly appreciate any comments on the structure of this, the areas we're talking about in this report.
I don't have any criticism of the draft outline at all. These are all technical terms of art here that probably don't mean too much to a lot of people, and certainly be available to explain any of those if they're questions. But
maybe you can explain, just for my benefit, sectoral negotiations.
But it's actually very simple at bottom. It's just kind of horse trading. I'll open up this part of my economy if you'll open up yours. So you would apply. You would want to look then at and see what kind of quote unquote sectoral commitments the United States has made. What areas of the U.S. economy are going to be bound by the World Trade Organization services rules, and then you want to apply that to the facts of your situation here in Maine, and see whether there are any potential conflicts in terms of law, and you also want to do some research in terms of what countries or what companies might have an incentive to sue internationally. So it's kind of a risk assessment any lawyer might do.
Is there enough groundwater? Is it adequately regulated? Do we have the right property law for groundwater? And then the question that's most familiar to you, how do international trade agreements potentially impact the state's regulation of water? I would just want to keep in front of all of us that question about the property law within here, because the legislature really has that question right in front of it. A number of the bills ask the question, is the property law that governs groundwater is privately owned in Maine, is that the right structure? And that threads into, do we regulate it well enough? Does that impact how we stand with regard to international trade? So that one sort of feeds both ways into regulation and international trade.
I've never had to deal with international tribunal deciding something that affects us here in Maine. But my question would be is if Maine can enact a waiver or exclusive jurisdiction for its natural resources that are based in this in this state, that people would have to have these cases heard in a Maine court, not a international tribunal.
I think this is the top of my list too, because I see that as a very practical research topic. You have a question that you need solved.
And then there's just conclusions, which is what we would work on sometime later in the fall, in terms of conclusions and recommendations back to the legislature. There, we're now in July. We're having this initial meeting. Do you typically have an August meeting of the commission? So that could be a session to begin to address some of these concerns. Some of the Water Resources Planning Committee, I'm not planning to have separate committee meetings outside of this process. This is enough for us to work on at this time. So we'll just consider your meeting to be a joint meeting with my committee. August 28th?
Last Friday of the month.
And then continue. How much lead time do you need to announce a public hearing, and how does that get organized?
High school auditorium in that area, and I'm sure that Senator Gosofsky, Representative Webster, and others will be very helpful in helping us do some site selection, and then we can move forward on that.
Very good. Yes, Andy.
If I could just add to Leslie's comment. I know Representative Campbell, Jim Campbell, had legislation that Representative Webster actually introduced the bill that was the Blue Ribbon Commission that got turned into this. Representative Campbell introduced a bill that talked about the property rights framework and has expressed a lot of interest in being able to follow this. The southern Maine area has had, south of Freeport, has had a lot of groundwater extraction proposals where there's been a lot of interest as well. So we could talk about where you might be able to go geographically if you're leaving Augusta. And we should keep Representative Campbell in the loop as well. And I've told him I would do that, and he could follow some of these deliberations.
Before you leave, I want to recognize our Attorney General. Janet, it's nice to have you with us today.
So I couldn't be here earlier. We plan on following this issue. You have one of the best resources in my office to assist you and engage in these issues. I appreciate everything you're doing, the forum, the committee, and the commission members in this very sensitive area, the intersection of local, municipal policies and regulations and state policies, intersecting with national and international laws and regulations. Very, very heady issue you're taking on. What do we do to help immediately?
Thank you, Attorney General Mills. We appreciate your being here today. And we appreciate having Linda, too. Very, very much so.